my prayer today, that we would all see something of you that we've never seen before. That when we walk out of these doors today, that we would take a deposit in our lives that wasn't there when we walked in. Something that would help us to walk more closely with you, to experience more of your life in our lives, to break down some of the walls that are in our hearts, Lord God, and to help us to walk this walk so much closer than we've ever walked before. We commit this time into your hands in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Now, I have some props here this morning, and I brought two of them because I was sure I was going to break one of them, and I thought I only need one, so I'm thinking that I should give this one away. Who likes chocolate? 3 people. Only 3 people. This is like... Now, if I throw this, do you think people can catch? Do you know what my daughter just said? Do you think you can throw? You know, you would think that she would know me better than anybody else in the world, right? Because she grew up in my family. So she should know that I can throw. Oh, and it's smashed. All right. So I still have my prop, and it's still whole. A number of years ago, a mate of mine bought an imitation Apple Watch, which he was quite proud of, because he knew that I was an Apple guy, and he showed it to me when I dropped around to his place, and he said, look at this watch that I got from eBay. And it looked exactly like an Apple Watch, and the reason why he was so proud about it was it only cost him $45. And my Apple Watch cost a lot more than $45. And we were comparing both watches, and they looked nearly the same. I tell you what, those guys over in China, when they want to copy something, they do a really good job of it, right? So we're looking at his watch, and the interface on the front of it, they copied that really well. So basically what they did was they put a skin over the top of Android, because Android, the operating system, Android operating system for watches is free, right? So they got this cheap, fake watch, put an Android operating system on it, and then put a skin over the top of that to make it look like it was an Apple Watch. And we're both having a look at this thing, and he was really chuffed. $45. My watch had cost me, the Apple Watch that I had at that time, had cost me $500. It'd take me months to save up the money for it. You know, it's like putting money away. But he bought it just on a whim. He'd just been online, saw this watch, looked exactly like an Apple Watch, thought, I want one, only cost $45, I'll buy it. And so we're sitting there looking at his watch. It wasn't long before we realised that not all that glitters is gold, because once you started to navigate into the watch itself and look at the apps, you realise that the apps were really dodgy. They were low quality, as most Android things are. And anyway, we had a look at this watch, he's chuffed, I'm thinking, 4 weeks later, he was no longer wearing his watch. Guess why? Because it had stopped working. At first glance, it looked great. But the old adage, you get what you pay for, is just as relevant in the day of Temu as it was for my parents' generation. And yet in so many people's hearts, we have this expectation or hope that we can pay peanuts and get diamonds. And then we get upset when our bargain purchase breaks down and stops working. Easter is a little bit like that. There's the genuine article, and then there's the substitute. A 4-day holiday, chocolate Easter eggs, and imaginary talking rabbits. The heart of Easter, the true heart of Easter, is a history-shaking, life-extending event that changed our world forever. God coming to earth and living amongst us, as recorded in our history books, nailed to a cruel Roman cross to pay the penalty for all our sin, and then coming back from the dead 3 days later, as proof that his claims about himself were the real deal. An event the resurrection, an event to this day which has not been disproved. Jesus wasn't a made-up character that came out of the creative mind of a professional storyteller. He was a real person who was born in Bethlehem, grew up in the village of Nazareth, and never left the borders of Israel except for a brief time where his parents and himself were refugees in Egypt. A man whose life was so impacting and history-changing that it split our calendar right in half. For 2,000 years, we've measured historical time by his life. BC, AD. Now, I know that some academics at the moment have been pushing for a change to BCE and CE, before Common Era and Common Era, simply because they think that, and rightly so, that BC and AD are a Christian measurement that we use, because they're measured around the life of a man who lived 2,000 years ago. But he wasn't just any old man. The tragedy of Easter in Australia today is that we've exchanged the real item with a cheap substitute, and then tried to convince ourselves that the substitute is as good or even better than the genuine article. Because you have to, or else you end up looking foolish. But how can chocolate eggs substitute for food that nourishes our very soul? And how can imaginary rabbits substitute for a flesh and blood God who history claims lived and walked amongst us? You know, when people say that there's no difference between the two, it's like the purchaser of the cheap plastic knockoff watch saying there's no difference between their purchase and the genuine article. We all know they're just kidding themselves. And yet we all kid ourselves at times. See this egg here? This is where it comes in, right? My prop. I got this from Frankie and a few of the other guys when they use props. Everybody seems to like it when people use props, so here's my prop. See this egg here? This is the cheap substitute. See how easily I crushed it? The early church, somebody can eat that later. The early church was birthed after the resurrection of Jesus. And the Roman Empire, one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen, was unable to eradicate it, even though they did everything they could to wipe it off the face of the earth. See, that's the difference between a cheap substitute and the real deal. And yet so many people live their lives chasing after the cheap substitute because they think that the real deal costs too much. Yet those who are willing to pay the price are so glad that they did. You see, this morning, we're not celebrating cheap knockoff watches. We're celebrating something that is far, far more important than what you wear on your wrist. As C.S. Lewis said, Christianity, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The only thing it cannot be is moderately important. And that should be a bit of a wake-up call for some of us here this morning. Not all roads lead to Rome. Buddha is dead. Muhammad is dead. Confucius is dead. Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, and Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, are both dead. Every leader of every religion from the past died and remained dead. except for one. And his name is Jesus. He stands alone on history's pages. He's the only real deal. You see, you are not gullible if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God. You are no more gullible than the person who believes that Julius Caesar ruled Rome, or that Captain Cook sailed a boat into Botany Bay, or that Malcolm Fraser was a previous Prime Minister of Australia. As I said at the end of one of my messages a number of years back on Easter Sunday, you don't need faith to believe in Jesus' birth, the account of his life, his perfect fulfillment of prophecies spoken of him thousands of years before he was born, his death by crucifixion, or his resurrection. You don't need faith to believe in them. They've already happened. The historical record is overwhelming and unassailable. Faith is only needed for things that have yet to take place. Just think about that for a moment. Some people say, oh, you'll believe in anything. Well, I totally disagree with that statement. I don't believe in anything. If you told me that fairies lived at the end of my garden, I wouldn't believe that fairies lived at the end of my garden. If you said that you'd met a God who looked like an octopus, which some atheists like to say, so I believe in a God who looks like an octopus, I wouldn't believe you just because you said that you believed in something. But if you said to me that a historical person existed and there was evidence about his life written down about him, not just by people that knew him, but by people that had heard of him, then I believe you. If there was evidence. And that's the thing. God didn't speak through a prophet thousands of years ago. God came in the flesh, walked amongst us, was seen, touched. He was spoken to, and he spoke to people. He did things that nobody else had ever done. And he said things that nobody had ever said, and they were written down. And he said that everything that he had taught would be proven by one thing. That after he was put to death, he would come back to life 3 days later. 3 days after his crucifixion, on Easter Sunday, Jesus came back to life. Which shocked his disciples. You know, if I was writing the story of Jesus, 20, 30 years after his death, I would probably try to paint myself in a much better light than the disciples painted themselves in. But they told the truth. They abandoned him, ran away, thinking that they would be put to death as well if they hung around with him. When they were told that somebody had seen him, they didn't believe. They were, no, that can't be right. One of them, Thomas, when he was told by the other 10 that were left that they had seen Jesus, said, I don't believe you. I mean, come on, let's be realistic here. 10 of your friends have just said, we just seen something. And you go, I don't believe you. Unless I actually see him myself. And Jesus turns up and he sees him. And he falls at his knees. The skeptical one amongst them, Thomas, falls at his knees and he says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus doesn't rebuke him and say, I'm not God. But he does say something that is important for us to hear today. He said, you believe because you've seen. But blessed are those who believe and haven't seen. And I believe that Jesus was speaking down through the pages of history to our day and age. We didn't see the resurrection, but we have accounts of the resurrection written down by people who experienced the resurrection. Paul himself, when he was being challenged by some rulers that just didn't appreciate this cult that they thought he was involved in, made the comment that 500 people witnessed the resurrection of Jesus. And he said, and a lot of them are alive today. Now, you don't say that to people. You don't say it to a person if you're lying, if you're making it up. Because he said that because he was basically saying, and you can go and find those people and you can ask them if they saw Jesus. And they'll tell you that they did. Faith is only needed for things that have yet to take place. You don't need to have faith to believe in what has taken place. You just need faith for the future. And this is where Easter gets really exciting. Because of the facts surrounding Jesus and his life, we can have faith for the future. One of the last things that he said to his disciples before he was crucified was written for us by one of his followers, John, and it's found in John 16:33. He said, I have told you all of this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Now this was just before he was put to death and 3 days before he'd come back to life. He was speaking here about the future and the peace and confidence his followers could have because of their belief and trust in him. He was telling them that he was the genuine article. And if they trusted in him, everything would be okay, regardless of the challenges that they were having to face. All of them faced extreme challenges. All of them, bar John, were put to death because of their faith in Jesus and never once recanted their belief in him and who he said he was, the very Son of God. Now, Jesus said two things about life that I want to close on this morning. He said that he'd come to give us life, life in all its abundance. The real deal, the genuine article, not the cheap knockoff version that others offer. He also said that narrow is the road that leads to life, and the road is difficult. There's a cost involved. You see, my mate's knockoff Apple Watch gave up after 4 weeks. But my Apple Watch has been going strong for years. One of them didn't cost much. One cost a lot. Now, in life, I've come across plenty of people who have regretted buying the cheaper version of products. But I've never met a person who regretted paying the price required for the genuine article. This morning, I want to encourage you to keep on going if you're following Jesus. There's a cost involved, but the payoff is the real deal, the genuine article. It's life in all its fullness. One of the things that totally surprised me when I first became a Christian was how my experience of life changed virtually overnight. And I remember talking to some friends after my second year as a Christian. I said, you know what? Looking back over the last 12 months, I feel like I have experienced more highs and more lows than I had experienced in all of my 19 years before that. I said, I feel like I've actually lived for the first time ever. The problem is, once you've been living like this for a while, you kind of get used to it, don't you? You just think, well, this is just life. This is the way we do life. This is just normal. But I want to remind you, if you've been walking with Jesus for some time now, that the life that you're experiencing is not what people out there who do not know Jesus are experiencing. Because they're experiencing the cheap, knockoff version of life. Jesus said that he'd come to give us life and life in all its abundance. The real deal. And nobody else has the credentials to promise that or to even offer that to us. Because he's the only one that died and then came back to life. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a made-up story. It's written about in our history books. And the only reason that you're sitting here today, this far away from the birthplace of Christianity, is because Jesus' life that he offers to all of humanity is the real deal. It has lasted the distance and continues to this day to transform and change people's lives.